So, in 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, and we were all told at the time that this would help liberalize China. How could so many very smart people be so very wrong?
Well, that is an excellent question. And it's because they wanted to be. Basically, they wanted to be. Let me say it a little bit different way. Our foreign policy elite, beginning, I would say, with Kissinger and Nixon, beginning in 72, Nixon goes to China. And continuing through Reagan and H.W. Bush and Clinton and W. and so forth. It decided in its own head that China wanted to become what Bob Zoellick called a responsible stakeholder in the global liberal rules-based order, as Bob described it.
They thought China wanted to become that?
Yeah. So the argument was, let me take you back actually to 1982. So I was a leader of the first U.S. trade mission to China in 1982. This followed Kissinger and Nixon go in 72, 78, 79. Carter normalizes relations with China. We move our embassy from Taipei to Beijing. Chinese take the Security Council seat in the UN. And we are beginning to develop then on that a new relationship with China. And the idea is that we can really develop an economic relationship with China that will, because Deng Xiaoping has now said, let's let a few people get rich. And that was interpreted in the West as, hey, they're going to go for a market economy. And we can help them do that. We know how to get rich. And we had a lot of business people who desperately wanted to help China get rich because they thought that would also enable them to be rich. And Deng had thrown off the fetters of Mao and the Cultural Revolution, put Mao's wife in jail and so forth. So 1982, I am in the Commerce Department. I'm Assistant Secretary of Commerce. And the White House tells me, Clyde, take a bunch of business guys to China and let's start developing this relationship, a trade relationship. And a trade relationship free trade will inevitably lead to political liberalization. And so that's what we did. There were moments along the way. The biggest moment was 1989, Tiananmen Square. Think about this for a minute. From, let's say, 82 until 89, we had been developing a more complete relationship with China. We've been urging our businessmen to go to China, invest in China. And we had seen, of course, the beginning of real economic growth in China, and certainly a much more liberal political environment than existed under Mao. And so it looked like things were going our way. And then suddenly Tiananmen Square comes along, and Deng orders in the tanks and shoots, nobody really knows, the 700 to maybe 10,000 kids. I don't know. Now, George H.W. Bush is president at that time. I had worked on his staff. I knew him and I admired him. But he made a decision that I think we all have to scratch our heads about. Deng sends in the tanks, and the very next day, Bush sends Brett Scowcroft, his national security advisor, to Beijing immediately. And what's the message? The message is, don't worry, George, will keep the boats from rocking too much. And Scowcroft adds to Deng, at this moment, George H.W. Bush is your best friend in the world.
Wow.
Now, at about that same time, Bob Galvin was then the chairman of Motorola. I was an advisor to Motorola. I knew Bob very, very well. And Bob and I had lunch, and Bob said to me, Clyde, I'm going to go to China, and I'm going to meet with this guy, Deng Xiaoping, and I'm going to set up Motorola China. And I'm going to use the fact that Deng has had kind of a setback here because of the tanks. I'm going to use that to obtain a deal under which Motorola China will be completely independent. I'll own all of it. There won't be any partners or state-owned organizations in Motorola China. And and obviously Bob thought he could do that because he thought Deng was in a weak negotiating position. And so, sure enough, Bob goes to China, and that's exactly what he did. He got a deal from Deng to have 100% Motorola owned operation in China. But what did Deng get? Motorola at that time was the leading U.S. maker of cell phones. It was a leading semiconductor manufacturer in the U.S. And so, what did Deng get? He got a factory. He got technology. He got a step up in his plan to develop the Chinese economy. And that was and then Bill Clinton runs for president in 1992. And what was remember his slogan, 1992, Clinton said, "We will not tolerate dictators from Baghdad to Beijing." But shortly after he was elected, he changed. And he started talking about positive engagement. And while he was talking about positive engagement, U.S. business leaders, people like Hank Greenberg at AIG, Fred Smith at FedEx, Steve Jobs at Apple, all these business guys were suddenly running to China to see how they could effectively what they wanted to. They wanted to do business in China, but certainly people like Jobs wanted to transfer essentially their manufacturing to China. They wanted to get rid of their labor unions. They wanted to get rid of the environmental conditions or rules in the U.S., and they wanted cheap labor. And so they were looking to move their production to China. And at the same time, U.S.-China experts, the people who go to school, who study Chinese, become fluent in Chinese, then they work at the Council on Foreign Relations, or they work at Brookings or some other think tank institute as China experts. These people kept writing that China was liberalizing, that there was a strong feeling that the inevitably, as you open markets and you have competitive capital-based markets, you enter into free trade agreements, this inevitably leads to political liberalization. And in fact, George W. Bush made the comment later on that free trade carries the seeds of democracy with it. So there was just a concatenation of business, policy, and academic expertise, all centering on this notion that helping China develop its economy, and China was going to become more capitalistic, and it was therefore going to become more liberal politically. And this occurred despite Tiananmen Square, number one. And then shortly after Tiananmen Square, in 1992, China decided to develop its own satellite positioning system. We had GPS. The Europeans have their own system. Both of those systems were available to China, but China said, nope, we're not going to use the American system. We're not going to use the European system. We're going to build our own. This is 1992. Then in 1997, we have, of course, the internet is beginning to be a significant thing. And China announces that it's going to build a great firewall. 1997, so keep that in mind. And what China means by a great firewall is they're going to censor the internet. They're going to split the Chinese internet away from the World Wide Web. In doing so, they're not going to allow people like Google or Amazon or Microsoft to operate in China, and certainly not to have their hands on anything like the internet. Faced with this, Bill Clinton says he's told that China wants to try to control the internet. And Bill Clinton says, ha, 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 let them try. It'll be like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. Now, think about that. Today we hear about decoupling, and frequently when you hear the decoupling discussion in the U.S., the tone of the discussion is that it's America that is trying to decouple from China. Oh, no, this is 1997, and China is splitting the World Wide Web into two different internet systems. China is decoupling in 1997, and we deny that it's happening. Clinton says, let them try. Then we go to bring them into the World Trade Organization, and those negotiations take place in the late 1990s. And eventually, China joins in 2001 when Bush W is president, but the negotiation was largely a Clinton negotiation. By that time, so by 1998, 1999, the U.S. trade deficit with China was getting pretty big. It was about $80 billion, and it had been growing, pretty substantially. And Charlene Barshevsky, who was the U.S. trade representative, Mickey Cantor, her predecessor, they argued that by bringing China into the WTO and by giving China most favored nation treatment, that would reduce the U.S. trade deficit. And the argument was that we have already our tariffs, U.S. tariffs are very low. China has high tariffs. So in any deal, we're not going to reduce tariffs because they're already reduced. And so it'll be the Chinese who will have to make the tariff reductions. And as they do that, then America's exports to China will suddenly fly, and our trade deficit will be reduced.
Do you think that they actually believe that, or do you think there was just corporate pressure from U.S. corporations?
Combination of both. Certainly, there was corporate pressure, but the interesting thing here is the discipline of economics. So they would get econometric models, and they would run these models, and the model would show that, if we do this deal with China, U.S. exports are going to soar, and the deficit is going to be reduced. Now, a problem with models is that they are very, very much subject to garbage in, garbage out. The assumptions of the econometric model are critical. And typically, the assumptions in these models were unrealistic. But it was a good way to sell the deal to Congress. You go up to the Congress, you're the U.S. trade rep, and you say, I just have a model here from the Brookings Institute or the Peterson Institute, and their model says blah, blah, blah. And so we have to do this deal. Not only will it be good for China, it'll be good for us. And so, we did the deal. And then 5 years later, the trade deficit had risen by about tenfold. And then if you follow progressively, so China joins the WTO in 2001. Then 2005, China publishes a 5-year plan, which begins to target for Chinese development industries like aviation and semiconductors. And then you get to 2015, and China announces the Made in China 2025 program. And this is essentially a laundry list of all of the leading edge technologies that China says are going to be made in China by 2025. So let's say from the period of when Nixon goes to China, 72, from 72 until, let's say, March 1, 2018. I'll come back to that date. But let's say March 1, until that time, the entire American foreign policy community was married to this notion that the Soviet Union had collapsed. Frank Fukuyama wrote the book, We're at the End of History. From here on out, it's all going to be democratic politics and market economics. And so the elite was married to that. And if you contested that, and believe me, I tried, but if you contested that, you could not get published in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. I mean, no significant publication would publish you because you're obviously so stupid and wrong.
So even though, like, you had the Tiananmen Square massacre, you had the start of the satellite program, the Great Firewall of China, the persecution of Falun Gong, even though there were all these warning signs, you just couldn't get that message out.
couldn't get it out. And I mean, when Obama became in the Obama presidency, I remember so clearly. Must have been, it was in his second term, so must have been 2013, 2014, something like that. Uh, I was invited to the White House to meet with the president and some of the top cabinet people, and I was invited along with four or five other people like me, think tank people, policy people. In that meeting, I tried to get across the idea that that we were actually uh, losing our leadership in a lot of high tech industries. I particularly picked the semiconductor industry. That's one that I've had a lot of experience in. And I was just, it was like I was from outer space. And my colleagues who were also invited to meet with the president were they and I were on different planets. They embracing, continuing the notion that, hey, we're the leader and we're always going to lead in high tech because we're so creative and so entrepreneurial, and China's going to be catching up. And it's good because that'll make China more democratic.